Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast, Lender Lounge with Kevin Kim. Good morning to you, Curt. Thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
Well, Curt, you are the founder and CEO of Builders Capital, and
No, I'm actually the founder and chairman.
chairman
I'm not the CEO.
Chairman of Founders Capital and Builders Capital, and I really appreciate you joining us today because Builders has always been, you guys have been kind of the sleeping giant out where you guys are, and we've been following you guys for a long time. We recently started working together, and we did that short interview with Armanino a few weeks ago, and
right.
I really wanted to spend some more time with you and get some more insight from your end because it was a really good interview. So first of all, thank you for joining us today. So do you want to give the audience a little bit of background about Builders and about yourself?
You bet. So Builders Capital was founded in 2009. I had spent from approximately 1991 to late 2008 in the traditional mortgage banking business. I ran a division or region for First Horizon Home Loans based here in the Northwest, and we had a heavy emphasis in home builder finance. It was a key to the volume that we achieved while in the agency side of the mortgage banking business. And when the Great Recession came and we began to withdraw credit from home builders, as did every other national bank for that matter, it thus was born the idea that there's going to be a hole in the market. There's an opportunity to fill that hole privately, and thus was born the idea of Builders Capital. So we started the company in 2009. Kind of funny story, if you will. I was fortunate enough to meet the gentleman in April of 2009, who I consider to be my co-founding partner, Robert Hadley. Robert Hadley is a third-generation commercial development family office. And actually, our first customer, which we closed in May of 2009, was Rob Trent, who is now a partner in the business and the company's current CEO. So Rob had the same idea that I had, which was that the home building business is going to have kind of a vacuum for a while as builders deal with the implications of the Great Recession. And so much like I started a home builder finance company, he started a home building company. And he started that in the summer of 2008. We funded our first project with him in the spring of 2009. And by 2011, Rob Trent's company was the third largest home builder in Washington State. He sold his business to Richmond American Homes, a publicly traded home builder out of Denver. That happened in mid 2011. He became an investor in our first fund. In fact, he was our first fund in 2012. And we had a 2-year commitment to manage money for him, essentially. And when we came to the term of that, we invited him in to ownership in the company. And it's been the three of us ever since. So kind of one of those stories that certainly wasn't the plan when I started. Right. But as most things happen in life, if you kind of keep your ear to the ground and your eyes wide open, you never know what may cross your path.
And that seems to be the truth in our industry, though. You guys are not the only ones like that, right? I mean, you work, your very first borrow becomes your first investor, becomes your partner, so that's great.
Exactly. So we've
keep going,
a path, since really our vision from early on, what was to have a growing presence. It was, and of course, initially we attacked the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
We've tried to be pretty methodical in how we've grown and making sure that we have the stability under the company, both in terms of finance and operations, right, to continue to pursue, that growth. And so, here we are today, setting aside how kind of bizarre 2020 has been. But I think we closed $10 million our first year. Last year, we closed something north of $550 million. and we'll have a business plan going into 2021 that is in excess of $1 billion. So it's been an interesting and pretty incredible ride over the last 11 years.
So, I mean, 11 years, the industry has shifted gears and changed priorities, and people have entered and left, and you guys have been here for 11 years now. And 2009, private lending was very different back then, right? And there was no Dodd-Frank. There was no, it wasn't as, the licensing rules were not where they are today. Securities regulations weren't where they are today. Describe for me how you guys, enter the market, because a lot of folks who are getting started, they have kind of they have a big question mark. They come from origination, they come from mortgage banking, they come from another shop. They got a great book of business, but it's a big question mark for them. And like, kind of, how do we, what things do we need to make sure we have in place when we get started? All right. And you talked about stability, right? Steady growth and stability. I think that's one really good takeaway our audience can hone in on. But besides that, I mean, 2009 was a chaotic time, right? And now from a regulatory and legal standpoint, I was, watching all that. But from a business standpoint, private lending was in its infancy, and especially with construction lending being just completely decimated, and then folks kind of coming in to fill the gap. So describe to me like what that was like, and what are some things that for you, what are the things that you think you look back and say, what, that was the right move. These are the right key things that we had in place that allowed us to scale, in 2011, 2015 and onward,
Yeah, I would tell you, it has changed. It's changed dramatically. And there's been a couple, I would say, kind of milestone events, along the way.
Right.
So I'll kind of start with, I was 40 years old, when I started this, had always had kind of an entrepreneurial itch. I had a great job. I had 18 years into a career, on the mortgage banking side. And but I had this entrepreneurial itch that I had to scratch. But I will never forget day one, which was basically January 3rd, 2009, leaving the comforts and frankly, the compensation of what was in my rearview mirror and stepping out to the abyss of, private ownership and the reality, of that. I went out immediately to raise capital. I was not funded, when I started, aside from provisioning for my family, frankly. And I will tell you, the first 3-4 months of 2009 was brutal because people were so fearful of mortgages in general and anything real estate related,
right?
Because the economy was collapsing, around what was often referred to as the subprime, disaster. And truly, Kevin, by the grace of God, I stumbled across, and I literally mean stumbled across, Robert Hadley, probably the one guy in the Pacific Northwest that had an appreciation for why this was so critical.
Well, how did you guys meet then? How did you guys meet? Where did you guys meet at? Is it an event? Were you playing golf? What was it?
No, it was a referral. I was involved in an organization for about 15 years called Vistage. It used to be called Tech. My Vistage chair in a one-to-one, that if I'm honest, I was frankly questioning what have I done to myself and to my family,
right?
If I'm brutally honest. And Jim tried to give me a pep talk and said, hey, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I had a transaction. I had fully vetted Rob Trent's transaction, and I was literally T-minus 3 weeks from closing. I had no capital commitments, and it was a $5 million funding. And so I'm talking to my mentor in my Vistage chair, and we leave that meeting, and he says, I don't know any real estate people, but I know a lot of Vistage chairs. Let me reach out and see if I can make a connection for you.
Right.
Literally in the next 48 hours, I get a call from another Seattle-based Vistage chair who connects me to Robert Hadley. And we have a meeting. The next day, we travel out to the site. We meet Rob Trent, and literally, 3 weeks later, closed on a transaction. And you'd have to interview Robert Hadley to ask him why in that moment he made that decision to entrust that level of capital. And of course, it was structured properly. There were protections in place given the newness of our relationship. But that's where it all started. And so as I think about folks entering it now, that was obviously a huge milestone event for me. If I was to do it again, I'm not sure I would do it without having that groundwork laid. It was, in a sense, probably naive for us to move forward and not have that capital secured, and therefore required, probably divine intervention for it to actually,
Right.
But the market's changed a lot too. I mean, the Jobs Act. When we started this business, most and the business continues to be this way to some degree across the nation. It's fairly bifurcated. You still have a lot of regional players. There are certainly national companies now that didn't exist back in 2009, but in part that kind of hyper-local layout of the industry existed because there wasn't a steady stream of institutional capital supporting, the industry. And so, and if you wanted to start a fund and you wanted to, lend $10 million, let's say in year one, you had to go find at least 5 of it and probably 5 of leverage, right? Or you got to fund the full 10. Now that's not necessarily the case. Now, 2020, COVID has changed this a little bit, although I see this marketplace returning. The aggregators coming on the scene in late 2016, 17, dramatically changed the barrier to entry, to the industry. Whereas in 2009, if we wanted to do 10 million, we needed to raise 10 million. In 2021, presumably, you want to do 100 million, you probably need 10 million or 5 million, right?
Not
you
even
need enough to fund.
You don't even need that. Yeah.
Turn over the business. Now, I would say we all got a major wake up call in March of this year when the repo market collapsed, and all of a sudden, that $100 million origination channel being supported by $4 or $5 million worth of equity and the ability to turn those loans over quickly, with the aggregators, that shut off overnight. And that should be a wake-up call to anybody in this industry operating on that platform. You darn well better have a backup, plan or capitalize at a higher level, or your business is at risk to something that you have zero control over.
Right. And that's been, as I'm the fund formation guy at the firm, right? So I've been preaching that for near 10 years now. But, how does someone say no to that easy money, right? And I always I don't blame them. I always tell them if I were in your shoes and someone was dangling that easy funding in front of me, I understand. And I've always advised my guys, listen, just think of it as a tool. It's a great tool. Yeah, it's not your only tool.
But it's not the only tool, and that's a great thing. And Kevin, something that's been true with us, all along, is we have been really disciplined about making sure that all of our eggs are not in one basket. Right. We don't have one institutional capital partner. We never had. When we had a fund, we didn't have one fund. When we came into the end of 2018, we had 5 funds and 11 bank lines, all of them relatively small, none of them able to tip the business over. Now we had multiple funds, so we didn't have 11 banks. We had multiple banks that spread out, lines across multiple funds.
Right.
But we did that. It's difficult to manage. It requires a greater level of sophistication around how you allocate loans, how you service and respond to investors. how you addressed investor concerns, like how do I make sure I'm not getting bad loans and the other fund's getting good loans? You have to address all of that, but it's much safer, for the business. And even as we brought on our first major, what I'd say institutional grade capital partner, we kept a fund of some size so that we had a lifeboat, if you will. And again, no one saw Black Swan COVID coming, at least no one in our camp. Yeah. And thank goodness we had our fund to rely on during those months, where the industry came to a screeching halt.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go back to kind of like the growth kind of trajectory of the company. So you said you started your first fund in 2011. But before that, so you had just been funding them directly, whole loans through this investor, Mr. Hadley, Robert Hadley?
Yep.
Is that how we got started?
Yep. Who again is a principal in the business. So we started with again, I guess you could call that a fund, but we funded internally, if you will, for the first couple of years. We added our first bank facility to that in the summer of 2010. We added.
You were able to get a bank line in 2010. That's no easy. That was no easy feat. I mean,
no, no, not at all. And we got a second line in the summer of 2011, almost exactly a year later. We then did all the PPM work, and actually we went out to market with our fund in early 12. But it was about that same time that we approached Rob Trent, who had sold his company, and said, would you be interested in investing? He said, I will, but I don't want to be in a blind fund. Is there a way that I can be a single investor? So we paused our kind of public facing fund. We spun up a similar fund for him, just mimicked our public fund, of which he was the only investor. We added some leverage to that, obviously with his approval. And then we deployed that capital over maybe a 9 to 12 month period. And we went back out with our public fund in the summer of 13. We were actually another kind of milestone event for us that, again, we kind of, frankly, stumbled across. We ended up getting picked up by RBC Dane Rauscher in their alternatives group, which we had no idea how rare that is for a Wall Street firm. And it was only, I think at the time, it was a $20 million raise. And, we were naive enough to pursue it, and we just caught them at the right time. They were under pressure. They were losing investors at a local level to a lot of registered investment advisories that could offer alternatives. And historically, the Wall Street firms, if they're going to do alternatives, they have names like Starwood Capital, right? They're not small ventures, but they decided to do a local alternative. And so they took on the fund. They filled it in literally like 3 months. So we now had, in essence, 2 funds. And we kept that pattern really from 2013 through 2018. We added another family office who once again wanted their own fund. We set some limits as to what the minimum investment size, if memory serves, it was 10 million to have your own fund. And you had to agree to sign up for some leverage, which we arranged. We did all the heavy lifting around figuring out, again, how do you address the inevitable concern that investors raise, which is, well, how do I make sure I'm not getting bad deals? Or self-selected deals. So we generated a computer-based algorithm that selected funds on a blind rotation.
Randomizer?
With a randomizer. And so we did that. And again, it wasn't until, and that took us to about $350 million in annual production.
And this is what, 2012, you said?
No. This is probably now 2015 or 16.
Okay.
And
that's when the industry got real hot, 15, 16, right? That's when things were just rocking and rolling. Yeah.
Exactly. So we then organized, that takes us into 2017. And we did a very deep planning exercise in 2017 and really kind of set the course for the next 3 to 5 years for the business. And the key things that came out of that are, where do we need to invest in the business, and where does the business need to be for us to pursue a national footprint?
Right.
And so we designed some practices around how we select markets. We made a decision at that point to make what has turned into a massive investment in our own technology platform, which we have built from the ground up, because we couldn't find a solution off the shelf that had the customization that we wanted. And we went to work on our capital structure and set out a vision for how do we ultimately get to institutional capital that falls outside of kind of hedge funds and private equity. And that means you're into pension or insurance or some other form of capital that was a little bit more permanent and had a much lower return threshold than, again, a typical hedge fund is going to require.
Right.
And so we went out to market with investment bankers, and really through that process in 2018, we came across our first, again, what I'll call institutional capital partner, and that was OneSharp. We were different in that they were buying a lot of basic fix and flip business. So we spent about 6 months with them, 5 or 6 months, working on how to make their platform and our platform work with construction loans.
Right.
We crafted kind of a unique program with them. They made a significant commitment to us, and that allowed us to consolidate our 5 funds into one fund, and then to run that alongside our relationship, with OneSharp. And that has really taken us through. And immediately, we bumped our volume up to, 550 some million, in 2019. We went back out to market with Salutigrade, who I know you guys know well.
Yep.
And who has been—
Shout out to Ryan. He's coming up on another interview. I asked him for an interview, so.
Yeah, that's great. They have been an amazing partner to us in so many ways. But we went to market with them. And actually, as we went into COVID, we had a signed term sheet for a substantial new commitment. COVID kind of scuttled that for 6 months. We got them back to the table. I should say Ryan got them back to the table kind of early summer. And we just closed on a new $500 million commitment in October that really sets us up to crest that $1 billion mark, kind of knock on wood, hopefully in 2021. So as we sit today, we still have our fund. That's a critical, again, component. And we have kind of 2 institutional capital partners, if you will. One in OneSharp, which is more of a selling relationship, if you will, and one with an insurance company that's actually got room to continue to grow as well as our business grows.
Right. I think an insurance company is a really good fit. A lot of folks think they have to find like some kind of institutional LP or some kind of institutional, like actual Wall Street head. Like, you'd be surprised what the insurance companies will do. They are more flexible. So
exactly.
Well, I mean, what's interesting, I'm hearing a couple unique themes though, right? So from foundation until 2016, you're at, in 6 years, the company's balance sheet goes from 0 to $350 million, right?
Correct.
But you coined it as God's grace and stumbled upon. But first, I want the importance of networking and asking, right? And a lot of folks they always ask me, Kevin, like, how do I go out and do this? Like, where do I go and find these people? Like, right. And a lot of these guys are originators, right? Or the former originators, mortgage bankers. They're not in the, they've never professionally raised money before.
Right.
I tell them, well, you either got to have the traditional deal guy, money guy kind of format.
Yep.
Or you got to get out there and pound the pavement, shake hands and kiss babies.
Yep.
But, a lot of people don't know how to start. And like, I mean, do you have any advice for them on that? Because that's, you say you stumbled upon it, but I feel like, it wasn't just, you had all the right circumstances. You're part of, you're part of Vistage, you said? You're part of, is that like a leadership organization?
Yes. It's the old tech. It's CEOs and business owners predominantly. It's by design very diverse. There were 15 people in my Vistage group,
right.
And it's a full day commitment once a month. So that is quite expensive, and it's a massive commitment. You can do the same. You can do part of the same thing, I think, by exposing yourself to things like AAPL, Pitbull conferences. There are constantly, now they're harder to find, but there are constantly investors perusing, those events. We had great success with the Fairway America platform. They host an
Northwest.
event.
Yeah, they did a lot of stuff in the Northwest. Yeah,
absolutely. And so they obviously, again, this year being unique, but we've attended, I think, 5 of now 7 or 8 events where they ensure that there's going to be real estate investors, involved. And so, but you're absolutely right. You have to set your mind to getting out and getting in front of, and exposing yourself to the marketplace. And, what I found was, and look, I say stumbled across because to some degree in that moment, I was quite discouraged. I had probably had, 20 meetings and mind you, it's the spring of 2009, right?
Yeah.
It's the eye of the storm. Yeah. And I'm getting
response. And anything that smells like a mortgage is not going to be interesting to an investor.
Like, what? Not only mortgages, but construction mortgages.
Right.
I had people ask if I had read a newspaper or watched the news at all in 6 months. But yeah, being exposed and keeping an open mindset to it just takes one. I didn't really think it only took one, but it convinced myself that it just takes one, find the right one. Yeah. So,
I mean, today's marketplace setup is makes it even better, right?
Oh, totally.
If you can find a $5 million, if you can find a $1 million investor, $500,000 investor, he has 2 friends. Absolutely. But it's about asking, and I found a lot of people just can't get out of their own way and won't ask.
I guarantee you, it's in their network.
That's what I said. You probably know some people that'll invest. You just got to get out there and ask,
Or they know some people. Right?
Right. The hardest part is say, can you introduce me to that person?
Yes.
Right. Well, I also want to ask you about who is doing what, right? Because during that 6-year growth period, a lot of our clients, a lot of our listeners, and myself included, I want to know about, how you built it from a personnel and process and operations standpoint. Was it just the 3 of you guys for 6 years? I mean, yeah.
No. Early on, probably for the first 3 or 4 years, of the business, we had a very skeleton crew, because again, you're growing a business and there's only so much profitability and or OPEX,
Sure.
to go around. And so accounting is such a critical, important function, especially when you are managing other people's money. Mm-hmm. So we focused early on making sure we had tight controls, around accounting in the early days of the business. I handled, and again, we didn't have a ton of capital to go around, but I handled almost all the originations for the most part for probably the first 4 or 5 years of the business, 3 to 4, years of the business.
So you're at that time, were you CEO or were you still chairman or?
No. I was CEO and chairman. I don't really love that title, but it was the only thing we could think of. I made a shift. Rob Trent is probably one of the most talented executives, business owners that I've ever worked with. He has an incredible knack for our technology platform. He's a proven entrepreneur, built a business in 3 years and sold it to a public. And, frankly, after 11 years of kind of grinding at that wheel, I was ready about a year ago to transition away from direct responsibility for our staff and to really focus more on our capital strategy, some of our new markets, new products. And so Rob stepped into the CEO role in January of this year. Really up until, and Robert Hadley has always been alongside the business. We co-office together here in Seattle. He doesn't hold a functional role in the business because he is the president. I don't know what they call his title, but basically president, CEO of Hadley Properties, which is a very active commercial development family office. They have a master plan community that is still in production in Colorado Springs. They have a quasi second home master plan here in Central Washington. They've got a massive operation over in Honolulu, Hawaii, commercial real estate. But he is ever present, always available. The three of us are always together on anything critical around the business as it relates to capitalization or strategy. And so that's kind of the way that the three of us, interact. It's partnerships can be tough. They, as my father used to say, they really aren't like marriages, because marriages are based on love and partnerships are generally based around economics, right?
Yep.
We have been, I would speak for myself, I think the two would agree, we have been really blessed in our relationship. We take a kind of unanimous, we're either all in or none in approach to things, not every decision, but major decisions. And it's really, really worked. But back to, the early days of the business, I guess I was CEO up until, again, January of this year. Accounting was a critical function as the business built, making sure when you're doing construction loans, different than, I think we've never been a big fix and flip or bridge, lender. So I only know construction, but understanding where the projects are at consistently is critical. Having in-house ability to assess and make decisions and guide, what are we going to, projects get off track. So we've always had that capability to some degree. I mean, we use a third-party inspection service, but early in the days had, a gentleman in-house who is actually a general contractor. It was a ton of help, to us. And then as volume began to build, we began to round out, processing, customer service, type roles. And it's in large part why we made the investment, though, starting in 2017, that we've made in our technology platform. We had to figure out a way for technology to give us scalability.
Now, describe the platform. Is it an LOS platform? Is it a processing platform?
It's all the above. It is literally, we've built it from the ground up, and we really started with the accounting function and worked forward. Oh. And I say that because ticking and tying so imagine a time when we've got 5 funds that are all different, have kind of a similar waterfall structure, but all different, then migrated into an institutional partner that's more of a selling relationship where you've got, B pieces and waterfalls and extension fees and different ratios for different things. And now to a third or a second institutional partner, but third tranche of capital, keeping all of that straight, you have to have technology. You cannot run that on Excel.
No way. Yeah. But I mean, had you guys tried out like other options? Like there are, I mean, accounting wise, there's a huge suite of accounting softwares out there,
So we poured into NetSuite. So we're not running all the, it's exporting to NetSuite, but in terms of tracking all the loans, keeping track of all the waterfalls, managing all the draws, everything, our philosophy is it's a one database business, and we want everything in that database to be able to be as close to one entry as possible, all the way up to when the client comes in and enters in that application information, it begins to feed through the system, and we're not rekeying that information.
So it's front office, back office.
Yep.
And also loan processing as well?
Yep.
Wow. And fund administration.
Correct. Well, fund administration, fund administration to a degree. In other words, we do, so we have a NetSuite interface for accounting, and we do keep track of our basic investor, like accreditation, et cetera, balances, notifications through, Juniper. I think it's Juniper.
Yeah.
So it's third party. We use the very basic functionality, of that. But everything else is inside what we call LMS, loan management system. It's proprietary. We have in-house, in essence, a chief technology individual. We have now 2 full stack developers. That is something that we continue to invest in very, very heavily. And we think is a key, frankly.
It's kind of a unifying theme, though. Every lender I've met that has a full-on operation, they're not, they fund the actual direct lender operation over 200 million, has made some type of investment into proprietary software. And that makes me wonder, what, and that goes to kind of the point of how fractured our industry is, if you think about it.
Right.
If you look at the conventional mortgage space, there's no one making their own software there.
No way.
And we're not that different if you think about it. And so it's always made me wonder, and I like to hear, because you came from the conventional space originally before, and so you've always been in the mortgage business. How is it that why is our industry so fractured, and can we get to a place where it's unified like the the more conventional markets?
Yeah, I would tell you 2 key things. There's no Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or Ginnie Mae.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Securitization it would be key. And I will tell you, I think it's a little bit of be careful what you wish for, Kevin. The beauty to our industry is the ability for customers to get what they need when they need it without going through, all the hoops. Look, there is a great, again, and I only know Builders Capital is our name for a reason, right? It's the most elegant way to describe what we do. If you wonder, we provide capital to home builders. That's our market, right? We're crystal clear, on that. So I'm not as, a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, you can do a construction loan. You can't do a fix and flip loan. Well, we can do a fix and flip loan. We just can't do it as well as everyone else out there that that are experts in that space.
Right.
And, but we would stack ourselves up with anybody, analyzing and executing, on construction loans. But back to the bifurcation, that's part of it, right? The way that we do it is a little bit different than, I'm trying to think of, than Genesis, does it. And that type of, what's true about the mortgage banking business is standardization.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have a lot of, sure, you've got bigger lenders that have different contracts with Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie, but they're not that different, right? At the end of the day, maybe based on performance, they're getting, and I don't even know if this is true anymore. It was certainly true back in the day. We might get a little bit more expansive program parameters because we've had excellent performance on our Govy pool. And so we're getting a little bit more, accommodation there. But so again, I think the private industry needs to be a little bit careful for what it wishes for.
I'm not advocating for it. Personally, I love the fact that it's kind of a, if you can dream it, you can build it kind of industry, because it's commercial actually, right? What we're doing is commercial lending. So we don't need to worry. And it doesn't need to be that type of industry. Frankly, if we had that, I think we would all run away. I mean, you would get significant regulation, not just from the government, but from these agencies, right? And so
Right.
I think that, and what I was worried about was I started seeing that sort of like when the aggregators started to come to our space, but even then it wasn't becoming like, it wasn't standardizing. It was, a lot of our clients were seeing that that shouldn't be the only answer. We're not going to standardize under that flag.
Exactly.
We're going to be, we're going to do what you guys did and other things. So that's, I mean, personally, I wish for it,
Yeah, even with that, what's interesting, and I'm so thankful for that relationship that we have. So please know this as I say that. But even that segment of the industry is starting to be controlled by the repo providers.
Yeah.
Right? That's the reason that the business shut, in my mind, that is the reason why that business shut off in March. Right? It wasn't because, to my knowledge, it wasn't because the aggregators themselves were like, well, we need, and it was wise to take some sort of pause. But come on, by May 15th, it was like pretty darn clear as data started coming out for April, and certainly by June 15th, when data was coming out for May, that, hey, single family is proving to be highly resilient, to the COVID related issues. But it was the repo providers in the background, holding the keys to the kingdom,
Right.
that, as I understood it, had said no new business will meet our continuing obligations for draws on fix and flips or construction or whatever. And
Right.
so again, there is still, I think, a wide open field outside of the aggregators for business that's quality business, but for whatever reason doesn't fit that mold. It's true portfolio lending.
Right. And I think that's because we're not truly, consumer, we're mostly commercial, and there's kind of these random niches all across the space.
Yeah.
There's so much room for everybody. And I actually think that we thrive in the fact that it's kind of fractured.
Yeah.
And we are beneficial. We can collaborate more as opposed to the conventional market. I was just worried about it. And some folks say that it's coming. I don't necessarily believe it because of the fact that of the fund, the need to have discretionary capital is going to keep those types of standardizations at bay. But we'll see. We talked about kind of the past, and you've told us your story, and I think it's an amazing one. I mean, wow. Actually, I do have another question. When did you guys make the decision to hire a general counsel? Because I know you have a general counsel, right? When was that decision made?
About, let's see, Catherine, probably 18. We may have actually made the decision almost 2 years ago, but then Catherine's been with us, I think, about 18 months at this point. Now, I will tell you, we probably would have made that decision earlier, Kevin, were it not for the fact that we have benefited massively from Robert Hadley's organization having internal counsel. There is really a fourth key person that's been alongside the business for, 7 years now, I believe. And that is Robert Hadley's counsel, Jeff Bashaw, who is a rock star. I mean, the guy has got capacity beyond that I have great respect for. He knows our business intimately from meaning Builders Capital. And but we started to stretch. So Jeff directed traffic for us on the, all things kind of legal related for a number of years before we finally said, okay, it's time that we bring someone in-house direct. As you guys know, we still continue to farm out a fair amount of business.
Of course.
Really helpful to have that person inside for day-to-day stuff that can be addressed just immediately, and also make high-level decisions as to what needs to go outside and what can stay, in-house.
Right. So if you're looking back on it, if you didn't have that, I guess, secondary in-house counsel before that, under your partner's business, would you say you'd add one right around, I don't know, I mean, we're using assets under management as kind of a threshold, like 100 million mark, 50 million mark?
I'd say probably, as I think back to the years, it probably would have been around we were probably in that 150 to 200 million mark.
That's about right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's when you start hitting that threshold of work where you're so diversified and there's so many random little things that come up. GC seems to be a good idea. All right. Well, I want to ask kind of your thoughts on where we're headed, right? And because right now, especially with, there's another stimulus coming. There's, we just had the election. There's talk about PPP forgiveness being problematic for our industry, but then you also commented on it, right? In June of this year,
right?
We all realized that Resi was going to be just fine,
right?
And so I'd like to hear. If you get your crystal ball out a little bit, and we're going in 21, and things are looking good. On my perspective. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, we're very bullish on 2021. I think I'm no economist. I worry about. I think the discussion around stimulus or no stimulus is almost comical in the sense of it's analogous to me to doubling down on a bet in the spring. The conditions haven't changed. It's clear it's the right bet, and yet there's hesitation to do it. Well, we never should have done the first bet if we didn't think we needed to follow on and protect small business. I'm really concerned about how that comes home to roost in the absence of further stimulus. But assuming people smarter than me, I guess, ultimately figure that out and make the right decision. The single family space is unlike certainly anything I've seen in my almost 30 years of being in this industry. There is a massive and growing shortage of inventory nationally. It's present in every market that we operate in. There has to be more liquidity pushed towards the space. Now, again, our concentration is home building. I think the biggest risk our builders face, whose biggest competitor, whether they realize it or not, are the nationals, is the shifting balance of the landscape. Historically, we've been nationally about a 65-35 split, private builders to national home builders. That is changing rapidly. And it's changing rapidly because there's not enough liquidity in the land acquisition and land development space. And the only ones that can afford to do it, because they can do it with, in essence, public funds, right? I don't mean government funds. I mean, they're publicly traded, are the nationals. And they gobble up every massive,
Every development now is a Toll Brothers or a Lennar or there's no private flags being thrown anywhere. So
exactly. Yeah. And so it's concerning because while there is a massive shortage of inventory nationally on the single family space, thus an incredible opportunity for home builders to fill that need, there's got to continue to be more liquidity into our space to privately to provide that. Because it's clear after 12 years now, the national banks are not going to solve that problem, right? They are not going to come back into the space anytime soon to the way that they were pre-Great Recession. And so we think there's an incredible opportunity. It's a concerning opportunity nonetheless for the reasons I just described. Interest rates.
Yep.
The biggest threat that I think we have, and I don't care if you're doing fix and flip or you're doing construction loans or frankly bridge loans for that matter, interest rates are the one thing that can turn this market on its ear, overnight. I don't think there's much risk of that. I think economically we need a continued low rate environment to spur growth. But it is the one thing to keep a kind of careful eye on. But aside from that, assuming that vaccines and therapy treatments are going to start to unlock, our world and people are going to be out and about a little bit more, which will help the resale market come back. There is just a great opportunity. And so we are very bullish on 2021, kind of looking forward. I think it's just hard to see outside of that, given a change of administration and just other general, unrest in the world. Again,
right.
of that COVID related, but we are super bullish on 2021.
And you guys are planning to go beyond your core markets, right? And
Correct.
we're planning to go into, is it more eastern markets now, heading east or heading south?
Well, yeah, since we're Seattle based, it's definitely east and south. We're operating in many of those markets today, but we will continue to push very selectively. We have a kind of a philosophy around and some metrics that follow where we want to be, nationally. Now, there's no great secret. Most of them are the hottest markets, in the country, but we're actively, of course, in Washington, to a lesser degree, Oregon right now, because Oregon has some kind of draconian House Bill 214 that although that market continues to be pretty strong, and that will pass, and I imagine we'll be back to being a little bit more aggressive in Oregon. We're pretty conservative right now there. Idaho, huge growth market for us.
Yep.
Colorado continues to be. We've got boots on the ground, Denver, Colorado Springs, and we'll continue to grow there. Texas, particularly, Austin, Dallas, are markets that we continue to fund business in or are interested in. Kind of central and northern Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, markets that we're active in and will continue to grow in. Of course, Tennessee as well. We just funded some business in Kansas City. So we will continue to look selectively, and again, predominantly east or southeast, if you will. You guys will continue to help us with some licensing.
Oh, yeah.
We'll open up California. So, yeah, big growth ahead for us as we look into 2021.
And all going to be focused on construction loans, residential construction loans. That's
residential
beautiful.
Construction loans, kind of, AD&C, acquisition, development, and construction.
Yep. And I want to like tell folks this, like a lot of people come into this market and they try to jump national, right? Especially with the aggregators being available, all that Wall Street money being available, they jump national. And how long does it take your team to decide we're going to enter this state? And what are some factors you guys look at when you're deciding that?
So we have a couple of different things that help us from a technology perspective. We actually have a partner that's a big data background, multiple companies built and sold, I think both to Microsoft, that is now a major investor in our private fund. They provide us with a tool that was built around, oddly enough, we outlined for them probably 3 years ago now, here's kind of the way that we analyze the market. And they said, well, take a look at this, what we've built. And it's a 40 data point algorithm that basically gives a bond rating for every zip code in the country. So we use that with every transaction we underwrite. It changes, the data changes quarterly. We also have another, I'll call it kind of a CMA type tool that's pulling data from MLS that also gives us a market strength score, which is a more micro view than zip code.
Right.
But at a high level, as we look out at markets, we stack rank the top 20 markets that we were interested in based on about 15 criteria in 2017, many of them I just mentioned, many of which continue to be hotbeds around the country. And that really drove, our first layer of diligence as to, are these things true about these markets? Are they then markets that we want to pursue? We then got boots on the ground. As an ownership group, we spend a lot of time on the road, a lot of time on the road together in these markets, be it Florida, Georgia, Carolinas, DC, Texas, Colorado, Idaho. We spend a lot of time on the road, putting our boots on the ground and surveying, is what we think real about this market real? And then we go through a pattern of what is the licensing criteria? What are the statutes in the state relative to foreclosure, receivership, our default remedies, making sure we understand that. then making sure that our loan docs are provisioned for whatever nuances we need to deal with at a state side. So I would say it's no less than a 120-day process.
Right.
From the time that we say we've assessed and that's where we want to do business. Now let's see if we can attract a customer and see what we get with relationship to local custom. Because something that you talked about earlier that is quite unique to our industry is there isn't a standardization. There's no Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac,
No.
Ginnie Mae. So we need to make sure we can also make money, in that market. And we can get pretty competitive at this point, but making sure that we're going to be able to put forth a program that people are going to welcome and that's going to allow them to be successful and for us to be successful. So I would say, Kevin, on balance, every state's different. California is going to take us a year, probably, from the time we said go to go. But I would say probably on average, it's somewhere around a 6-month, process.
Right. And a lot of it is market data and actual local level transaction data, right? You're looking at that.
Correct.
And that's something that's overlooked. There's a lot of folks, they expect the transactions. Oh, yeah, it's a friendly state to this and that, and then they don't look at the actual transaction size. And their minimum closing is $500,000, but the average closing size and transaction size in that state or that county is $125,000. Well, you're not going to make much business there,
right?
So,
right, and we try to stay away, from that. I mean, really, we would like to have our average kind of per unit be 250 plus.
Right.
There's a good business, I'm sure, underneath that, but just in terms of our kind of, per loan OPEX and making sure it's worth to deploy the capital in, we really try to stay at that.
What is your 250 to what? What's your usual sweet spot for per transaction?
Our per unit average, and when I say per unit, we'll do loans often that have multi units, right? It's a 6-unit townhome, but about 415 is our current average.
Okay, that's a good size. It's not too big, not too small. You're not dealing with like the random small shacks. That's great. Well, okay, so I want to kind of close out with kind of some advice to our audience, right? And you built this company, you had some great success over the past few years. You guys are going to kill it going forward with that new partner of yours. I'm very excited for you guys. Over the years, with all this in the rear view and looking forward, what are some pitfalls that a newer market entry can avoid? You've kind of seen it, a lot of it. You've grown organically. You've done a lot of the things that I would say are best practices. For the up and coming fund managers that are growing or up and coming lenders that are growing, what are some things that they can avoid to make sure that they, are successful like yourself?
Yeah, the things to, I didn't certainly make up this saying, but slowing down so you can go fast is never truer, I think, than in this industry. When things go wrong, they really go wrong, right? In other words, even if, we talked about 415 is not a large average transaction size, right? Not too big, not too small, but it's a real pain in the ass, excuse my French. When it goes wrong, it's a lot of capital at risk.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, look, I would say spend enough time up front to avoid the rush to get in, making sure that you've thought through your capitalization and you've provisioned for rainy day scenario, right? No one planned for COVID, but making sure that you're not under pressure to make loans and make them fast, right? Which means don't do it if you're not properly capitalized for expenses to carry the business for, I'd say, 6 to 12 months, but at least 6 months, right? Because being in a hurry to deploy capital is bad in this industry. Being thoughtful around that, therefore, in the fund formation as well, right? As you know, getting a fund done and getting it done right, it isn't inexpensive and shouldn't be inexpensive, right? You got to spend the time to make sure it's structured right. So being thoughtful, therefore, around expectations with investors, I think is really important. right? We've done, I think now 7 or 8 funds. I don't know that we have plans to do another one, but in the last 6 of them, right, the time spent up front setting proper expectations with the investors. Now, we would allow them to make investment and have it start earning almost immediately, aside from our very first one. But setting the expectation that, look, this is the target that we've set, but it's a target. Here's the whatever the structure is, preferred plus profit split, whatever it is, and letting them know, look, it's probably a year, right, before we start hitting whatever the I don't want to say promise because it shouldn't be promised, but whatever the expectation is, right? Because again, there's nothing worse than missed expectations around,
and being methodical. I mean, I'm hearing the same thing. Being methodical in your planning.
Exactly.
Right.
Plan your steps. Plan. And then provision around what you've not planned for, because it's bound to happen. And make sure you've got enough, again, capital, forget fund capital, enough capital to support the business so you're not under pressure to make bad decisions, and then set an underwriting discipline and stick to it. Because you're going to realize right out of the gate, all of a sudden, there's all sorts of competitors and separating, what's true from what's not true. And I fear it puts an operator, and I've been in these moments where it's like, holy cow, I got to get this capital out, and I'm facing competitive, pressure. I think with proper planning and provisioning, you can avoid a lot of that. And quality underwriting, quality underwriting, is just, and even with that, you'll make mistakes. And so being thoughtful about what are we going to do if something goes sideways. I'll tell you, something that we adopted after going through a pretty scary situation with our largest customer in, I think, 2016, is we developed a different strategy around how to deal with projects that have gone wrong. Time is almost always the enemy.
Yeah.
And we used to be, and this is in part my nature, probably, that, well, gosh, this or that happened, and let's give them more time, or let's refi them into a new deal and kind of reset the clock. We fundamentally do not do that. This probably goes back now 3 years at least. We do not refinance ourselves out of our own problems. We deal with the problem inside the credit that we set up front. And we certainly try to apply some grace and understanding that things don't always go right, but we are pretty quick to pull the trigger to start more aggressive action if we don't see a major turnaround. Because what we realize is, frankly, it's rarely good. It's rarely good for us. And I would argue it's rarely good for them to just continue in a situation that's untenable.
You're just digging yourself deeper if you refi yourself out. I mean,
exactly. Exactly.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's like kind of like, I would say, it's so easy if you think about it, right? Just do the right things, have the right plans, be conservative, stick to your guts, don't stick to your guns, don't deviate. But it's so easy for our in this industry for people to deviate, and you see people out there that just take risk after risk after risk. And I wonder if it is because of the need to deploy capital and they just got to get it out there? They're not comfortable with having dry powder?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I see it a lot. I think it is.
Thank you very much, Curt. We are running long. And once again, everyone, Curt Altig, Builders Capital, founder and chairman. And thank you for joining us today. And we'll get this all put out there for our audience. And thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
All right. Take care.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.